We had one customer write us a tweet, and he said, all I heard was my 5-year-old and my 7-year-old yelling at each other about getting their Bitcoin to cold storage because they were playing the game. We're like, great, that's awesome. Children are easy. Children are so easy. You play the game with them, they pick it up in 5 minutes. You're like, I'm good to go. Where's my wallet? Give me some Bitcoin. Like it's quick.
Yeah, but what do you do and your husband?
Okay, so I just finished, I said just, but it was a few years ago. I finished homeschooling my 4 kids prior to having kids.
4 kids.
Yeah, 4 kids, homeschool all the way through high school, send them off to college. And then my husband and I were sitting there looking at each other like, what now? Right. So because that was my full-time job. That was 24/7.
Wow.
So suddenly I was done. And then all this time freedom. I'm like, what am I going to do with that? Right around that time, towards the end of my kids' homeschooling journey, Scott found Bitcoin, and he spent 2 years trying to convince me to get on board with him. And in the process of trying to get me to pay attention, because I was very resistant, like we were talking before, I was juggling so many balls in the air. I had no time or energy to give him to this concept that I felt was pretty irrelevant to me, right? I was single focused, trying to get the kids through high school. And he kept trying to get my attention. And finally, he said, you know what? Can I just put it in the board game form and just explain it to you? Because he's tried videos, he tried podcasts, he tried books and articles, all of those things. And I was either not willing to listen or read, or I did a little bit and I didn't understand and I gave up. So he finally made the first prototype of Huddle Up, which is the game that we have now that we are sharing with the Bitcoin community. And in an attempt to get me interested in Bitcoin so that we can enter the space as a team, fully agreed, together that we were going to invest in this thing. So over the course of 2 years, numerous prototypes finally got me on board. I finally understood the technology enough to say, fine, I will read a book. I will read a darn book. And of course, I read the book and I was sold because I'm 50. So I'm looking back at our journey, right? Our money journey. And I was like, I cannot believe that I didn't understand what was going on. And all the decisions that we made that we thought were so correct based on what we've been told was just playing into their game. And I was so angry. When I was reading my first book, I was so angry I had to put it down over and over again. It took me several weeks to read this one little short book called Bitcoin, Hard Money You Can't F With. But at the end of the book, I was completely sold. And so then the kids graduated and now I have time, and Scott and I are looking at each other like, what are we going to do? And I said, listen, if you can use this game to show me that Bitcoin is real, then another Bitcoiner is going to be able to use that game to show their family that Bitcoin is real. And so that's what started us traveling to different states and bringing the game to different Bitcoin meetups, which led to my realization that we really needed more female voices in this space, which is why I started Orange Hatter podcast. And then more traveling, more conferences, and Scott and I realized that there's a great interest in the Bitcoin community in self-custodying their children's education, which is homeschooling, which is what we did. I can talk homeschooling all day long. And so we started a podcast called Bitcoin Homeschoolers. So now we have 2 podcasts. We're running Free Market Kids. We're trying to promote Huddle Up. And Scott is a really avid game designer. That's his language. And so when Lightning started to become sort of common discussion topics in the Bitcoin community, second layer, making the transactions faster, cheaper, etc., he started thinking, how do I explain second layer to people? Because it can be very confusing. The inbound, outbound liquidity, it's not something very intuitive, at least for me, for people like me. So then he said, I want to make a Lightning game so that you can understand what they're talking about. So over the course of last year, he made a prototype, tested with us, then started bringing it to all of these Bitcoin gatherings. And and he tried to play with as many experts in the Lightning space as possible. And now it's ready to launch. So we have that.
Wow.
We have another one that he was trying to explain entropy, the C phrases, like why it works, why 12 words is enough kind of thing. So that's another game that he has developed, and he's got several games in the back of his mind that he wants to roll out. So yeah, so that's what we do.
But amazing well, he obviously has or both of you have a skill to bring complicated topics or knowledge across and break it down even for children. In your experience, is it actually, do people use it actually for children? Because I always think, anything that's made for children is so great for us grown-ups.
Well, we have found Bitcoiners who have purchased this game. It's been pretty evenly split between introducing their spouse and their brother, sister, and their parents, and sharing it with their children. Children are easy. Children are so easy. You play the game with them, they pick it up in 5 minutes. You're like, I'm good to go. Where's my wallet? Give me some Bitcoin. Like it's quick. So at the end of that, the number one lesson you take away from the game is get your Bitcoin in cold storage. You can't play the game and not get that one lesson. Everybody comes away from, and so children would be like, we had one customer write as a tweet, and he said, all I heard was my 5-year-old and my 7-year-old yelling at each other about getting their Bitcoin to cold storage because they were playing the game. We're like, great, that's awesome. Now, when our customers have told us about playing with your older parents, so they're harder to convince. They grew up under a different system, and they have a lot more questions. So when they play the game, they start to ask questions like, what is this difficulty dial? Why do you keep moving number up and down? How come you start with more Bitcoin and then by the end of the game you're earning less Bitcoin? Well, that's called a halving. And then we like sprinkle other stuff in there so they can ask questions. So if they want to win, which everybody playing a board game wants to win, they will inevitably ask questions about Bitcoin because they must. It's part of the game mechanics. And at the end of it, even if they're not orange pilled, like you said, they have to have a problem that needs Bitcoin as a solution, right? So even if they're not orange pilled, they cannot help but to walk away from the game understanding more about Bitcoin. And that's the whole point.
And how is it going? How are sales going? Because it's still a super niche, of course.
It is.
And how are you advertising it? Or are you traveling to every Bitcoin meetup in the world?
We try. Sales are going good. They always spike after we do a podcast interview because we still haven't figured out the marketing bit to reach Bitcoiners, because Bitcoiners, they tend, like the traditional email campaign, I don't feel that actually works with Bitcoiners. A lot of them don't have an email they check all the time anyway, or they have like 5 different email accounts. So they're very privacy oriented. That bit Scott and I haven't figured out. We're still trying to figure it out, but we definitely go to a lot of in-person events as much as possible. We travel to Bitcoin Park every month. So it's an amazing gathering place. But yeah, to answer your question, we need help. We need help with our marketing initiative because we know our product is good and effective, and we've tested it with so many people, and we have endless testimonies of how well this game works for acting as a conversation opener, because I think that's the hardest thing that Bitcoiners find with resistant family members. You can't even start talking about it, without somebody going, please stop. Kind of, it's almost like talking about politics during holidays. You can't really, like, how to even start, right? But if you say, hey, you guys, let's just sit down and play a board game, and we'll make some popcorn, pour some wine, make some hot chocolate for the kids, let's just play. And then in the process of it, not only do you learn about Bitcoin, you don't have to buy into it, but you learn about Bitcoin, but you also have family time, you have fellowship, and you're not looking at a screen, you're looking at each other in the eyeballs and you're interacting. So yeah.
Yeah, and also I don't know if this is a general thing, or I'm just noticing like a big comeback in my life in with board games. Maybe that's a COVID phenomenon, but like I'm a nomad, you know, I live in co-livings, I travel, I work from co-working spaces, and board games are everywhere, you know.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
That's what we have found. A lot of Bitcoiners are huge board gamers, and Scott obviously is a huge board gamer. His brother is a huge board gamer, and they go to this game conference every year called Gen Con. It's in Indianapolis, and I
Mhm.
think they average anywhere between 60 to 80,000 people per year attending the event.
Yeah.
I mean, there are some serious gamers out there, and they are passionate about their
Wow.
games, but they
Yeah.
are not Bitcoiners. So Scott tried bring his game there, and people are like, "What is that? We don't like. What is that?" Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So
But don't you find in your homeschooling community that there's interest there? Because it just the values seem to be aligned, huh, with those two communities.
Scott and I did bring our game to several several homeschooling conferences in the hopes of introducing this tool, because what better way to teach your kids about this new money technology, right? It's going to be the new
Mm.
money standard. And big and homeschoolers really care about that, like money education, financial education for their children. So we brought it there with such high hopes. But the crazy thing was that we had a booth, and we kind of the first conference we went to, we kind of danced around. We said, "Oh, we're educated. It's money education, you know." And once people heard that we were teaching Bitcoin, they were like, "No, thank you," and just left. I'm like, "That's so
Mm.
weird." So the second conference, we're like, "You
Mm.
know what? We're not dancing around. We're gonna put up, like, we had two spinning Bitcoin signs, like literally spinning over our booth. Like, if you care about Bitcoin, come here. We'll tell you about it. If you don't, fine." And
Yeah.
at that conference, I think there were 15,000 attendees, and you can see the traffic because you can see the aisle, and you have people just kind of moving, in almost like, I don't know, like when you're herding cows, they walk in a, like direction, right? What
Mm.
happens is they would see our spinning Bitcoin, and they would kind of make a wide berth around our
No.
booth, and they were like avoiding eye contact. It was the wildest thing. It was wild, and Scott and I are just stunned. We're like, this aligns with everything you believe about
Yeah.
homeschooling, why you're teaching your own kids, why you don't trust the public system. This fully
Mm.
aligns, but for whatever reason, they were not ready to hear it. I even gave a workshop about money, and yeah, so then Scott wrote an article in Bitcoin Magazine to talk about how much the two topics actually align, homeschooling and Bitcoin. So there's a lot
Mm.
of interest in the Bitcoin community to homeschool across the board. If they can do it financially, they want to homeschool their kids, but not the other way around. I think that will change
Mm.
though. I feel like it will change in the next few years. I think we just went there a little bit too
Yeah.
quickly and people weren't ready.